Hello, today is November 12th, 2008. We're meeting today with Mr. Norman, or Norm Markel, at his home in Greeley, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Norm, and thanks for participating in the project. Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
My birthday was yesterday. I was born November 11th, 1924 in Michigan City, Indiana. And I went to high school there, and they did let me graduate in '43, and three or four of us went to Chicago and enlisted in the Army Air Corps.
Now, did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have an older sister and a younger sister at that time.
Okay.
They're both deceased.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you graduated from high school and you enlisted in the Army Air
Four of
Corps?
us went over into Chicago and we enlisted as aviation cadets. We wanted to be in the Air Corps.
That's the reason you chose that branch of the service? Okay.
So they said, well, we're going to let you graduate in June, but don't go very far away from home because we're going to get you. And the next month we reported for duty, and we were sworn in Indianapolis. And I went to Lincoln Army Air Base in Lincoln, Nebraska for basic training.
Did the group of you all travel together, or did you go off solo?
We went to Lincoln together.
Okay.
And then, as cadets, we were assigned to a college, and we were sent to Missoula, Montana University. And that was fun. That was like October, November, and December. And we were there for 3 months. We had to run around the M partway up the mountain to get in shape. And the girls in the dormitory, on Saturday, they'd call after we had our inspection, and they'd say, well, we'd like to have about 7 or 8 of you boys come over. We're having a party at the sorority house. And anyway, it was a good time in Montana. And that was the first time that anyone in my family had flown, and it was in a little city, 65 horsepower
Wow.
Cub.
Do you remember that flight?
I remember that very distinctly. And I had a small instructor. He was only about 5 feet tall. And in the service, they called you by your last name, so I was Mark a lot in the service. And this little guy was my instructor. And when we stopped and got out of the plane, and he'd say, hey, Mark, I didn't know you could solo. And I said, well, I wasn't soloing. I just have a very small instructor. And anyway, it was a joke. And then this one time up there, towards the end, it was in December, and we were flying with the instructor because we never soloed up there. And the big white cloud was coming at us, and the instructor took over the plane, and he turned it, and it was a big snow cloud and wind, and so we headed south. We couldn't get back to the airport, and we were reported missing, and we flew about 60 miles south all the way down to Hamilton, Montana, and we landed there and tied the plane down. There was no phone in the shed. There was a pot-bellied stove and no fire. So we had to scrounge around for wood and get a fire going. We slept on the floor there. And in the morning we got up and dusted the plane off, and it looked fine. So we started it up and flew back up to Missoula, and they said, wow, we're glad to see you. You guys are reported missing.
Had they sent out any sort of search parties or anything for you?
Well, not yet, because we showed up too soon.
Okay. I'll be darned.
But anyway, then at the end of, before New Year's and between Christmas and New Year's, we got on a train, and we were sent down to Santa Ana Army Air Base. And there we took tests and qualified if we were going to be pilots. Everybody wanted to be a pilot.
Did you have a choice or a desire whether you wanted to be a fighter pilot or a bomber pilot, or you just wanted to
No,
be?
you just wanted to go to flight school as a pilot. And none of them that I know of went to pilot school. They had enough already, I think.
Is that right? Yeah.
So a couple of them, one of the four of us that enlisted in Michigan City, Indiana, he did go to bombardier school, but he never got out of there in time to see any combat or anything. So I went to radio school with another fellow that the four of us that enlisted. So we went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to radio school, and that was in January in a tar paper barracks with no insulation.
Oh, jeez.
And the latrine was half a block down the walk. You had to put your overcoat on and go down the walk in snow and blizzard. And a lot of us got pneumonia, and I was one of them. And they had brick steam-heated buildings in California. And where we were, they had coal and wood stoves and no insulation out in South Dakota. So, but anyway, we completed radio school, and then we were sent to Yuma Army Air Base in Yuma, Arizona, and that was July, August, and September in a tent. And it got over 115 a lot of times. The smartest move I made, I think, was they said, now, this was down in Yuma, Arizona, hot, standing there in the blistering sun. And the sergeant said, now, any of you fellas that can't swim, fall out over here. So I figured, well, I can swim, but I'm going to fall out. I'm going to go to the swimming pool.
All right.
So, anyway, all of us that said we couldn't swim, they said, okay, now they marched us over to the big swimming pool. And just like real beginners, now put your face down in the water and kick your feet. And they treated us just like little kids learning how to swim. And one of the things there was a pretty well endowed whack, and she had a two-piece suit on, and she jumped in feet first, and the top of her suit came off on the way up. You should hear all these guys whistling and hooting and yelling. And she tried to get out of that pool, and anyway, that was very funny. But then on the last day, they wanted to see if we could swim. Well, it turned out, I think that all of us knew how to swim, and some of them were professional divers. They were diving off the 30-meter board, and we were all swimming, and probably the ones that couldn't swim were out there in the sun marching. So after Yuma, Arizona, then that was the first time we had ever flown or the first time I had ever flown in a 4-engine plane, and it was in a B-17. And we were on a waist gun, and we'd shoot the .50 caliber machine gun and aim at things on the ground. And there was a little shack out there, and we figured, well, there can't be anybody in that. So we shot at the shack, and we found out there was a guy in there who had a coffee cup. Shot the cup right out of his hand, and lucky it didn't kill him. But he shouldn't have been there either. But then they made us all that finished radio school and gunnery school. We were all in over a year. And if we graduated from that, then we were corporals. And previously it had been sergeant. So then we got to go home for a little vacation. I think about 10 days, maybe, a furlough.
Had that been the first time you'd been home since you'd enlisted? Okay.
And my girlfriend said, what happened to PFC? So we jumped right from nothing to corporal. And anyway, then we reported back to Lincoln Army Air Base. And this was really something, because this was where we were going to meet our crew. And they listed the pilot, and then they listed the co-pilot, and then they listed the bombardier, and then they listed the navigator, the 4 officers of the flight. Then they listed the engineer, gunner, then the radio operator gunner, then the ball turret gunner, and the waist gunner, and tail gunner. And that was your crew. And there must have been 20,000 people in a hangar. And we were on an elevated stage, and there's a little second lieutenant up there with a big mouth. And he's calling off the names. And it's hot, it's August, and we're getting tired of this, you know. And someone in the back yelled, "Give me liberty or give me death." And that lieutenant turned around and said, "Who said that?" And another voice far off said, "Patrick Henry, you dumb son of a bitch." And the place went up for grabs. And anyway, we had to take about a 20-minute break before he started again. And that's when I heard, okay, Paul A. Colville, pilot. Donald J. Lehman, co-pilot. William N. Stark, bombardier. Neil R. Bartimus, navigator. Vincent J. Ferrero, engineer. Norman E. Markel, radio gunner. Charles B. Walker, he was a ball turret gunner. Harry S. Overbaugh, armorer gunner. And Charles, I forget the tail gunner's name, but anyway, he was from Oregon. And then we'd find each other, and the pilot would be there, and we'd shake hands, and that's the first time we met everybody. And then we trained, then we were sent to Sioux City Army Air Base to fly formation and train, and we had cameras on our guns, and they'd had fighter planes attack the airplane, and we'd get to see our film and see if we hit anything. And we would drop flower bombs on Minneapolis or someplace out there. And so we had overseas training and formation flying, and every week I called home because we lost a plane every week in training. They were all so worn out. And every week I'd call home and tell my mom, "It's me, I'm okay."
Did that ever play into your mind as you were training, that the danger? I mean, which, well, I'll let you answer that, and I've got another question in regards to that. I mean, the training danger of losing a plane a week, did it play on your mind at all? Or
the first Sunday that we got to Sioux City Army Air Base, there was a bomber landed and crashed into the firehouse. The firehouse was on fire, 50 caliber ammunition's going off, and we haven't even got to our barracks yet.
Wow.
And they were pretty worn out planes, and we didn't know any better because we never been through this before either, so we didn't know what to expect.
And kind of a follow-up question to that, we know now that the 8th Air Force took incredible losses over in Europe. Were you aware of that at that point, that there was that kind of loss of life in plane? And once again, did that play on your thoughts?
We just figured we had to go through it, that's all.
Wow.
There was a fellow that I went to high school with, and he was a drummer, and he went on the amateur hour in Chicago that was on radio then, $50 and a wristwatch. But anyway, he made two tours. He flew 50 missions as a tail gunner. And the odds of him doing that are, I don't know, probably 100 to 1 maybe. Okay. And let me think.
Well, we were at Sioux City now. Yeah.
So anyway, then we did finish. I had my 20th birthday there in Sioux City, and I didn't drink hardly at all. But I guess on my birthday I had a little bit, And then the Saturday after my birthday, I went into Sioux City and went in to have a sandwich and a drink in this tavern. And this girl came up to me and she said, "Well, you gonna dance with me?" I said, "I don't know how to dance." She said, "Well, you did last week." So anyway, I must have had fun then. And then after our training, we got to go home. In December, it was before Christmas, and then we had to report to Lincoln Army Air Base again. That was my 4th time to go to Lincoln. And they issued, for the radio operator and the officers and the engineer, we got a watch. And because we needed one. And we got a 45 with a shoulder holster, and we got equipment to go overseas. And we got on a train, and we were going on the New York Central to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, to get on the boat. And we went through my hometown, Christmas Eve.
Wow.
That was tough.
Unable to stop, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah, went right through.
Oh, boy.
And then we got off the train, and we were on baggage duty, and we had to get the baggage off the train and get it into a building so it could be distributed and whatever. So we didn't finish that until about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. We hadn't eaten, and it was cold and snowy. And so our engineer, Vinnie Ferraro from Brooklyn, he wasn't afraid of anybody or anything. He was just a little guy too, about 5'4". So he got this major by the sleeve and shook his sleeve. He said, "Hey, Major, we haven't even eaten." He said, "We're hungry." And he said, "We've been on this baggage duty." So, and he said, "Well, you're coming in the mess hall," and he told the mess cook, he said, "Feed these guys." So anyway, they had to get the pots and pans dirty again and feed us, and we tromped snow all over the mess hall floor. And then it was New Year's Eve night, 1 o'clock in the morning, past midnight, and they wake us up and we're going to load onto the ship, the Aquitania. And we had the only people out there was the Salvation Army band, and it's about 10 below zero, and we're marching on that ship, and there were 14,420 guys going overseas on that one ship. And we, well, this one morning, we were in a big storm. One guy got washed off, and you can't stop. And even on the 3rd deck up, the waves had come in.
How was it for, here's a person from the middle of the country, landlocked Indiana. Did you get your sea legs? How was the trip for you?
I didn't throw up, but I was scared as hell because we were going all alone. We weren't escorted.
You weren't escorted?
And then this one morning, I got up, went out on deck, and I saw that all these ash cans or depth charges were not there anymore. Wow. I said, "Well, what happened to a crewman?" He said, "Well, we got a submarine following us."
Oh, jeez.
He said, "We'll probably see a cruiser this afternoon, a Navy cruiser," and he said there might be some PBYs come over, and they're kind of protecting us. That would have really been a catastrophe.
Oh, man.
So it took about 11 or 12 days to get over there.
And what were conditions on the ship? They must have been crowded. How was the sleeping conditions, the food?
I was 5 decks below the water line, and on the lowest deck, and there's stacked 5 high, and we're rattling our mess kits against the pipes there because we're hungry. And we had a colonel come down, and he said, "We got to get some sea rations out here or there." And the British were getting paid pretty good money to feed us, but I lost 10 pounds just going overseas.
Wow.
And the food was lousy. You'd crack open an egg and there'd be a chicken in it. And they'd have some salami and they'd drop it on the floor and they'd put it on, wrap it and wipe it off on their dirty apron and whack off a slice of salami for you and throw it on your tray like they're feeding a dog. So anyway, then we landed and got off the ship in Greeley, Scotland. Got on little trains. They must have been 6 feet wide or something maybe, and the seats faced each other. And then we were in Scotland. We went from, you don't know when you go from Scotland to England, but we went to Nuthamstead was our base, and that was, we had to go through Cambridge. So it was not far from Cambridge. It was probably maybe 10, 15 miles from Cambridge. And it was real sad when we got to our base because everybody's going around with a long face. He said, well, what's the matter? I said, well, our commanding officers didn't come back.
Wow.
Anyway, he took the crew. He took the bomber group 398th all the way from Rapid City, South Dakota, through training overseas, and he led that mission, and he got shot down and killed. And we had a train there, so we had to fly and drop practice type bombs over the Wash, which was east of England and the islands, and then we'd come back and land, and so you had to go through some training. And then I remember on the first mission there were 4 of us crews that trained together in Sioux City. We went overseas on the ship together, and we went to the 398th Bomb Group. And the one crew, I can't remember the name now, but anyway, they got shot down on the first mission. And we were on that mission also. And let me explain. They have the pilot fly your plane, our pilot, but our co-pilot flew with another crew that had experience, and their co-pilot flew with our crew to give us some experience and help our pilot out. So we had a different pilot, a different co-pilot rather, and we bombed, I forget where we bombed, Nuremberg, I think. We dropped our bombs, the whole 8th Air Force turns left, we turn right. And then we went through a big cloud, come out of the cloud, and we're all alone. And we flying along 15, 20 minutes maybe, and then our mouthpiece from Brooklyn, Vinnie Ferrero, he calls the navigator and he says, "Hey Neil, where the hell are we?" And he said, "Well, it's going to be a little bit, Vinnie." And about 10 minutes later, Vinnie calls him again. "Hey Neil, we're lost, ain't we?" So there's no comment. I guess we are lost. So we're going along an hour or so, and all alone. And then Ferrero, the engineer, calls up and he said, "Well, we got about 20 minutes worth of gas." So he said, "We better figure out where we're going." So we went along about 10 more minutes, and the pilot gives the signal to bail out. Get ready to bail out. So we're all lined up by the back door. The tail gunner unhitches the door and kicks that out.
This is your very first mission?
It's the very first
Oh,
mission.
jeez.
And I got on the intercom. I plugged my headphones in the right waist gun, and I'm looking out that window, and I saw a break in the clouds. And I called the pilot and I said, "Hey, Paul, I saw a ground down there." He said, "Well, you better make sure." He said, "We don't have gas to go down and come back up again." I said, "I saw the ground." So we went down a little bit farther and we broke out of the clouds and we were over a bombed out airfield in Lille, France, it turned out to be. So we dumped other stuff out of the plane and we got it back in the radio room in crash landing position.
Well, now let me interrupt you here to get somewhat of a timeline. Had we invaded France by then, or did we control that France, or were you landing in enemy territory?
No, that was friendly.
Okay, okay.
We had gotten that far.
Okay, okay.
So this was a bombed out airfield that the Polish fighter pilots were flying British Spitfires from that field.
Okay.
And we landed that big 4-engine B-17 in the grass between the runways because the runways were bombed out. And when we just about taxied to a stop, we were out of gas.
Wow.
So they sent somebody over to the Polish fighter planes over there and said, "We need gas." So they run a 500-gallon truck over to us. And again, Ferrero, he said, "What kind of gas is that?" He said, "Well, it's the kind they use in those fighter planes over there." He said, "Well, that's 130 octane." He says, "We'll blow our effing cylinders up with that stuff." He says, we can't have that." And he goes over to the pilot, and Paul says, "Well, have them pump it out of there, Vinny. We got to wait for 100 octane. Well, U.S. Army tanks use 100 octane also, and the B-17s did too, and B-24s, the bombers did. So we were there 7 or 8 days. We got a hotel and we had a good time. We got back to our bomber, but well, when we took off, we had to have the plane towed to the end of the runway, and then they walked it off, and we had to make a 45-degree turn on takeoff. And our left wing scraped the ground when we're taking off, and off we went. When we got back to our bomber base, the other crew that was on our first mission, they were on their 7th one already. So they had 30 missions in when we had our 18th in. And every mission they went on was like a milk run to Chicago or something. They never had anything happen. So that was our first mission. Then I think it was about the 6th or 7th mission, we run low on gas again, and we had to land right outside of Brussels, Belgium. And that was friendly also. And that was pretty nice there too, because we had a nice hotel, and I was with Ferrero, and we went and checked the windows to put the bomb curtains, open them up during the day. And there's a bottle of VAT 69 scotch back to the window. Boy, that was all right too. And we wound up being there another 5 or 6 days. Went shopping in Brussels, and they were repatriated, and it was great. And then we went back to our bomber base again and got the gas and whatever we needed. I don't know. I think gas was the problem. And see, that's at the time when the bulge was starting to.
Oh, geez, okay.
And, they didn't have any fuel to be given us. They needed it for their tanks.
Right.
So then on April 25th, that was the last mission that the 8th Air Force flew in World War II. And it was also the longest, farthest in. It was all the way to Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, to the Skoda plant. And our bombardier, Bill Stark, was leading the whole 8th Air Force.
Wow.
And he's up in Oregon now, and I gotta send him some pictures of the memorial. Anyway, he and I and the waist gunner are alive yet from our crew. And so we could see up ahead, and we were kind of ticked off because Eisenhower had called Europe and told the workers at the Squadron plant, don't go to work because the 8th Air Force is going to bomb you in strength today. Well, they had 18, 19 hours to bring in guns from as far away as they could bring them in.
Oh, gee.
And we could see the flak burst up ahead that we're going to have to fly through. And we get up there to the target, and it was cloudy, and Gustafson's crew was on our left wing, and we made the pass over the target and didn't drop our bombs, and Gustafson's crew got shot down, and we could see them going down. And we found out later that those that were alive when they got down, they got machine gunned by the Germans. They were all killed. And we had to make a big 360-degree turn and then go through it again because of the cloud cover. And that's when we got hit. So we had dropped our bombs, opened and closed the bomb bay, and during that run, the pilot had come back to the radio room to have a nature call, and he left his parachute back there. So I called him on the intercom, and he turned around and looked, and I whistled at him and held up his parachute, and he got a smile on his face, and we met in the middle of the bomb bay, and I gave him his parachute. And then pretty soon we heard this boom out on the wing, and there's a explosion in the wing, and the fire out there where you could throw a bathtub in that hole.
Oh, geez.
Fire coming out, and then the ball turret gunner, I think a little bit later the pilot gave the word to bail out. And a couple seconds later, the ball turret gunner is in the worst position on the plane. They have big buckles, and they have a backpack for a parachute, and those buckles cut into their legs, and they didn't buckle. So we had to get the waist gunner, and I were helping getting the ball turret gunner out of his ball, and we got him out of there. And then we had to buckle his leg straps, and I had one buckled, and I was working on the other one, and I look around, and it's just me helping him. The other waist gunner, he had jumped it, I guess. And so anyway, then it fell over kind of in a flat spin. It was on fire, and I figured it was going to just go all the way in and explode, and that was it. But there was an explosion. I knew I was going out through the air.
So you got blown out of the plane?
I was falling. I was blown out.
Jeez.
But when I woke up, then I saw my parachute and the red handle, and I figured, man, I'm not in heaven yet. And I pulled the ripcord, and I had fallen about 20,000 feet unconscious. And I was about 2,000 feet maybe when I woke up.
You think you just got low enough where you got oxygen again? Is that what woke you up, or how do you?
I think the angel of the Lord woke me up, and that's all I can. I'm here by the grace of God, and then I could see the trees down there. I was about 2,000 feet. And this was ripped open. I could see that. I could see the bone and stuff in there. So I just kind of covered my eyes and face and crossed my feet and started bouncing through the trees. And then the chute hung up in the trees, and I knew we were only about 8 minutes away from from the target, so it had to be in enemy territory. So I unbuckled and I tried to hang on to my parachute harness to pull the parachute out, and I wanted to bury it. It wouldn't come. So I dropped down. My feet were probably 8 or 10 feet from the ground. I was stocking footed. I was blowing out of my boots.
Wow.
And so the chute wouldn't come, so I moved away. I was in a forest, not real thick, but it was older forest, bigger trees, and it had rained the night before. It was quiet in the forest. So I got 40 or 50 yards maybe from my chute. I had an escape kit with a map and a little compass. I had my watch, and I was looking at the map, and I saw my hand. I figured, well, I better put a tourniquet on there and bandage. So they had some sulfa powder and stuff in that. Dumped that in and put a little bandage over it, and I was looking at the map, and I hear voices under my chute. I look over there, and there's 8 Germans with rifles. Figured, Norm, you're going to get it now. Just like the good Lord had something better for them to do and look for me. Off they went. And then I waited till about 6 o'clock. It was just starting to get dark. And at moonlight, I walked all night.
Without any boots, in stocking feet.
Right. And I thought I heard a Jeep shifting gears, and I figured, well, boy, I better make sure it is a Jeep. So I got in a position, and it was a Jeep. A Jeep had stopped, and both of the doors opened on the Jeep, and 2 guys got out, and one, when he turned a little bit, I could see the sun shine on his bars. He was a captain, and there was a sergeant driving. And I whistled and put up my hands, and they said, where the hell did you come from? So I told them I got shot down yesterday. They said, well, don't get in the Jeep. They said, we're making contact with the enemy, and we'll be back within an hour, maybe a little longer. We'll take you to first aid, and you'll be taken care of. So they come back in about an hour, and they took me to this little town of Marienbad, Germany, and there was an apothecary shop in an old brick building, and they had turned that into like a first aid station. And they gave me first aid there. And that's when the tail gunner came. He was in that town too, and they had found him. He put his head on my chest and, hey, Mark, you gonna be okay? I said, yep. I never saw him again. So they said, well, when we get an ambulance full, we're gonna take you to a field hospital. And so about 6, 7 o'clock that night, they had an ambulance full of wounded. And I think there, I don't know, 8 or 9 of us in that ambulance. And one big kid, he was like a linebacker. He was only 19, and he was so mad. This was his first day in combat. He had a nature call. He took his pants down. He got shot in the butt. And he was really mad. He wanted to fight those Germans. So, anyway, he was just a kid, younger than me. So anyway, we went back, and there was a tree down, and these infantry guys said, hey, this is a German trick. They said, so just don't go any farther. Anybody got a gun? I said, well, I got a .45, and somebody else had a carbine, and they said, no, if we don't come back in about 20 minutes or a half hour, then take off the other way.
Yeah, yeah.
And they came back in about 15 minutes or so and said, it's just a wind-blown tree, so we can go. So we went around that tree, and we went to outside of Nuremberg, And we were in tents. We showed up late at night. I don't know if they gave us anything to eat that night or not. We didn't care either. So then that next morning we went to chow. We got back from chow and everybody had their Purple Heart thrown on their bunk. That's how we got the Purple Heart.
Wow.
And then it was the day after that, a nurse came and said, Sarge, she said, they repatriated a German prison camp. She said, there's a doctor, a captain, and 2 nurses, and you if you want to go. I said, well, I don't have any shoes. She said, we'll get you shoes. So she said, tomorrow morning we're going to go to that prison camp. That happened to be Buchenwald. And that was something, I'm telling you. There were shoes stacked higher in the ceiling, and big old work shoes and little kids' shoes, and bodies stacked like cordwood, and their arms were, little bitty arms, all shriveled up. They're dead, but they hadn't had a chance to burn them yet. I opened those oven doors, and the bodies weren't all burned. It happened.
Now, why did they ask you to come to the camp with the doctors and such? What was
they went there too. So
what was your purpose of going with them?
Eisenhower wanted everyone to see what I had seen, because he said in years to come, people will say it never happened. It happened.
Wow.
Then I was flown in a C-47 to a hospital in England, and then when I was operated on, when I came to from anesthesia, I could hear the church bells and whistles. It was Victory in Europe Day.
Wow.
And while I was being operated on, they stole my .45. Still don't have it. And then when I was released, I went back to my bomber base. The war was over. My crew was gone. And there were a few pictures up on the shelf. And I was the radio operator for a load of 20 guys with their baggage to fly back to the States. So we flew the northern route, and we landed in Iceland and Greenland and Labrador, and then we landed at Grenier Field, New Hampshire. And that's when we left the plane. We got on a train and went through Boston, and that was very, very memorable, because I remember there was people out there saluting the train, and bartenders with their bar aprons on yet, and they probably were in World War I guys, and they were saluting us. And then I was given I don't know how many days, 10 or 12-day furlough, and I had a report. Oh, I had to report to Lincoln Army Air Base again. And they gave me a choice. They said, now, you can go, well, anyway, I chose Santa Ana Army Air Base. And I was out there in Santa Ana, California, when they were going to put me on B-29s.
Even after all you'd been through,
they were going to put me on B-29s
and send you to the
finish
Pacific?
my missions in Japan, because I only had 18 in. And then they dropped the atom bomb, and that was the right thing to do, because that ended it. And there would have been millions more killed in landing and trying to land and fight Japan on a ground basis. They didn't know what an atomic bomb was, and neither did we. But we
Yeah, what were your thoughts when you first heard about this bomb and what it had done? Could you even fathom what this thing was?
One bomb could destroy a whole city and a big city, just flatten it and melt it.
Could you understand that? I mean, it must have been amazing to hear.
It was the best they could do to try and explain it to us.
Yeah.
Just one bomb. So I know they did the right thing.
Right. So you're out in Santa Ana on VJ Day then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I got discharged from Santa Ana Army Air Base. And my cousin was a Navy medic attached to the Marines, and he was wounded on Okinawa, and he was at the hospital there in Balboa, Naval Hospital. And I came there to visit him. He and I were real close friends growing up. Our moms were sisters, and we were only 10 months apart. We had a lot of good times together. And but the Marines, when I come in at Balboa Naval Hospital, they really gave me the ration. They said, "Where the hell have you been the whole war? We never saw anybody in the Army Air Corps in the whole war." And anyway, it was all in good spirits. Yeah. And my cousin Howie and I and a friend of his from his church in Chicago, the three of us went out in the town a little that night. And on my 21st birthday, I was up in San Francisco visiting my uncle, and I was in a duck club. He was a part owner of a duck club.
Now, what's a duck club for us that don't know what a duck club is?
And about 190 acres, and they had a lot of decoys.
Oh, a duck club.
They had
Okay,
Pacific
I'm sorry. Okay.
Flyway, and we hunted ducks.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And we drank, and good cold beer and a good shop, and we had good food up there, and it was so relaxing after what I had been through. And then I went home and I wanted to get a job, and I think I had 2 jobs in December and another one in January, and the steel strikes, and anyway, jobs were not easy to come by.
Yeah, with everybody coming home.
We went, and that was coming home.
Yeah.
And later I decided I got my pilot's license, and then I went to graduated from Valparaiso University with a degree in business and accounting, had businesses, and here I am, still alive at 84.
I'll be darned. Well, if you don't mind, let's back up and can I ask you a number of questions about this? First off, talk to us a little bit about what it's like inside. You're in the B-17. What's it like up there? As far as I know, it was very cold. I don't think you weren't.
It wasn't insulated at all. You had electric suits, and you had a rheostat to adjust the heat to make you comfortable.
Were you able to stay comfortable with those, or was?
Well, you know, sometimes it got as much as in the 50s below.
Right.
So you had heated booties that you had in your flight boots. You had heated gloves, oxygen. The other thing is there's no restrooms in these bombers. So you urinated in a condom, and that practically froze immediately, and you threw that in the bomb bay. If you had a nature call, we had tinfoil that they nicknamed us chaff sergeants, and we put this chaff out through a little hole in the radio room, and the prop wash broke that tinfoil up and sent a
false signal.
Signal down that was false, and the gunners down below that were trying to shoot us down would get false signals because of the tinfoil. Those little cardboard boxes were perfect to go to the bathroom in. So we would do our dirty job in the box and put that in the bomb bay. Well, some planes we had 1,000 bomber raids, and that's 10,000 guys up there. And a lot of them had to go to the bathroom. So when you started down the bomb run, there was an initial point where you turned and went down the bomb run. So at the initial point would be where you would open your bomb bays. And you want to be thankful that you didn't live in that town where the bomb bay was, or where you opened your bomb bays, because we literally dirtied on them.
That must have been a sight to see some of these formations with all these planes.
Coming and going, just, 36 bombers in a group, and there's 3 divisions,
and in such tight formations too, is amazing how.
For 1,000 bomber raid, and we could each carry 6,000 pounds of bombs and 2,750 gallons of 100 octane gas.
Wow.
So I don't know where they got it all, but we had it.
And altogether, you were shot down on your 18th mission?
18th mission. And that was the last mission that the 8th Air Force flew in World War II. And I think that probably our ball turret gunner could have been very likely to be the last casualty of World War II for the 8th Air Force. And he was about a week past his 19th birthday.
And out of that crash, who else survived it? Obviously, you lost him. Was there any more casualties from that?
No.
Everybody else parachuted out okay?
Yeah, they parachuted out, and then I and he was trapped in there. And I saw the waist gunner about 40 years later. I was working for a home company, and they sent me to Sellersville, Pennsylvania. And I opened my window from my hotel room, and I look across the street, and here it says Sellersville Savings and Loan. And I figure, well, Harry Overball was from Sellersville. So I go over and get the phone book, pick up the phone book, and here it is, Overball, Harry S. This is 85, 40 years later. So I call and dial a number, and he says, hello? I said, is this Harry Overbaugh? He says, yep. I says, well, this is your radio operator from World War II. He said, Mark, where the hell are you? I said, well, I'm in a hotel across the street from the Sellersville Savings and Loan. And he said, well, I can be down there in about 20 minutes. So he come rumbling up in an old Volkswagen Bug, and we give each other a hug, and he said, what are you here for? I says, well, I'm here for a company, and I said, I'll have to call you back and see when we can get together and hash things over. So I said, I'm going to be here probably about a week. So I called him a couple days later and said, well, it looks like maybe Wednesday that I'm free. And he said, well, I'll come and pick you up Wednesday about 6 o'clock then. So he's in an old, over 100-year-old home. It was, my God, 2 foot thick. And he had a bottle of Chivas, he had cheese, he had shrimp, and we're sitting there, and I'm looking at his wall, and he's got a pair of German boots on the wall. I said, where the hell did you get them, Harry? He said, you don't know about them. I said, well, how would I know about that? He said, well, I came down in my parachute, and he said, I'm walking along. He said, I didn't have my boots either. He said, my boots come off when I open my parachute. So he said, I see this guy a couple 100 yards away with his hands up, and I look behind me, and there's nobody. So he's coming down towards me, and he said, I get my .45 out. I'm stocking-footed, and he said, he's got those boots. So I point to the boots and said, you know, I want them. And he says, no. So he said, I put one in the chamber and shot next to his feet. He said he took them off real fast. He said, those are the boots. And I says, well, what happened, Harry? I said, you and I were both helping Walker get out of the turret, and then pretty soon it's just me helping him. He said, well, it looked like you had everything under control, so I just got the hell out of there. I said, well, you son of a bitch. And we don't have much to do with each other because he put in for the Purple Heart and he never even went to a apothecary shop or a first aid or nothing. He and the pilot went all the way back across Europe and got to the bomber base and flew home together. There was nothing wrong with him.
Yeah, yeah.
But he met some one-star general that helped him get a Purple Heart. I don't have nothing to do with him no more.
Yeah, yeah. What, can you talk about a typical mission, or if there was even a typical mission you would take off, and if you could talk a little bit, kind of break it down, how would you prepare yourself for such a mission mentally, and then once you're over the target and you're getting flak and stuff, what were you thinking then, and then once you were landed and home free, how would you decompress from a mission? Or,
well, let me tell you this. The day before you're going to fly a mission, the control clerk, the CQ, would come and notify the crew members that you're not going to town tonight or anything because you're going to get awakened early in the morning. And there were 10 guys in a hut, and 5 crew members, 5 enlisted men from our crew and 5 from another crew. And then they'd come about 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little later, shine the flashlight in your eyes and say, okay, get over to briefing. So we had to walk to briefing, and it was, I would say, 3/4 of a mile. We had wooden walkways, and then there was a big straw stack. And you get to the straw stack, you'd turn and went in another little direction, and then they had the buildings there. And you'd go to the mess hall first and get something to eat, and then you would go to your different briefings. So radio operators had different frequencies that they had to work with and code numbers, and you had to hack your watch and make sure everything was right. The pilots and co-pilots went to another one, the bombardiers went to another one, the gunners went to another one. And then you'd get on the truck, and they'd take you out to your bomber, and you'd get organized in there. And they would have everybody, before they went off into their own little meetings, they had the big map, and then they'd show where the target was going to be. And then we would go to our individual meetings, and then after that broke up, then we would meet back in the big room, and then they'd take us out to the planes. And they'd tell you, you know, you'd have different bombs and different bomb loads for different jobs to be done, so to speak. And well, we had, I don't know what mission it was, maybe the 6th or 8th, something like that. And I was on the left waist gun, and we were coming down, getting into bomb run.
so let me interrupt there too, because looked like you had a dual job. Once you got on the to the target site, would you go over to and become a gunner, or were you just a backup, or how was?
That's a very good question, because as soon as the planes got into enemy territory, it was radio silence.
Okay.
So all the radio operators just turned off their big radio and went back to their gun position. I was a waist gunner and a radio operator.
Okay. Okay.
So as soon as got into enemy territory, turned the radio off and went back to my gun. I was on the left waist.
Okay.
And each gun had 1,000 rounds, 50 calibers. and we had the plane off of our left wing of ME-109. Focke-Wulf 190 came in and shot them down. We could see the pilot. He forgot to cut back on his speed. He come right up within 50 yards of us, and the top turret, Vinnie Ferrero and I both nailed him. And down he went. We got credit for that one. And that's about the only one that, and then another time, we were having trouble getting our bomb bay doors back up, and we were going to have to crank them, and the wind would hold us, get us farther back out of the formation. We couldn't keep up with them. So we're fighting to get the bomb bay doors up, and we could hear the tail gunner calling. He said, "Boy," he said, "something's moving in on us awful fast." He said, "My God," he said, "he doesn't have any propellers." And it was an ME-262,
Wow.
and we never were even told that they had a jet. We didn't know what the hell jet was.
Wow. Huh.
And when he was done making his passes, we never hit anything, and we shot probably 14,000 rounds at him, didn't hit anything, because it could fly that much faster than what we were used to or trained for. And then they took us in a separate briefing, and then they told us about the ME-262. And I'm still mad about that. Why didn't they tell us earlier
Right.
what to expect?
Oh, boy.
And you said you get hit by it, and then they tell you what it is. So then when you come back over friendly territory, then I could turn the radio on. I'd get music. You could hear the, and on April 12th, when President Roosevelt died, I heard that on the radio. And
You were in flight when you heard about that?
Yeah, I was flying back from a mission when I heard that President Roosevelt had died.
How did you and the crew take that sort of message?
It was a shock. We knew he was sick, but he was our commanding officer, chief, and but anyway.
And what would it be like once like I said, once you've landed and particularly after a rough mission, how would you? I mean, I would think adrenaline and stuff would be.
You get on and you come to debriefing, and I don't know if the bombardiers had to go to a special briefing, but the pilots and the gunners, they would have they'd have a shot of scotch or something, a good bourbon or scotch, and they give you a shot and a half, and you'd have coffee, and they'd have donuts and things. We hadn't eaten since breakfast, so you never take anything up there. And it'd be, 8, 9 hours. And then after that briefing was over, and you'd have a drink, and they'd talk and ask you, verify what happened, and they'd be interviewing. There was 3 points. I would say my prayer before takeoff with the bombs and everything. Then I would pray before we dropped the bombs. And I'd say a prayer of thanks when we come back over the friendly territory. And I don't know what the others did in the plane, but that was just my way of living and
Coping.
way to fight and cope with that.
Yeah. How about say that evening after you're laying in bed in the still of the night, were you able to forget about that and sleep, or would that still be playing on your mind, or?
No, we were fortunate, I think, where we talked it out, and we had a drink like that.
Yeah.
You know, heck, we weren't even old enough to drink.
Yeah.
I wasn't old enough to vote or drink, and I still got out of the service.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think that the drink helped settle us down, the talking out, that helped us. And then our camaraderie, we went back to our hut and we felt safe there.
Yeah,
We had a little dog there that greeted us, and a boy named Derek. We gave him the bicycles and radios and everything that was in our hut. He'd sweat us out. And we'd get back from a mission, there'd be 8 or 9 packs of cigarettes on everybody's bunk. And I never smoked. I probably wouldn't be here if I did.
Right, yeah.
And anyway, I gave those cigarettes to his family, and his mom would do our laundry. And we'd trade them for eggs and laundry and stuff like that. And then he would be sitting there sweating us out, making sure we're going to come home, you know. He's only 10 or 11.
Did you keep up and track of him after the war, or ever wondered what happened to him?
Well, I got back and my head was empty. See, the war was over.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was lucky that they took my socks and underwear, because they thought I was gone too.
Wow.
So that's what you did.
Yeah. Let's talk about the home front. How was it as far as communicating back and forth, like to your folks? And more interesting, you said you were very close with your cousin in the Marines. Were you able to keep in any sort of contact with him at all?
No,
Yeah.
not during the war at all. And in fact, I had to find out where he was through his mother.
Okay.
And then my mother told that was my mom's sister's
Right.
boy, and she said, well, Howie's injured, he's out at the Balboa Naval Hospital. So, and I had to ask for Howard R. Clark. So,
how was communications as far as between you and your folks back home? Was that pretty reliable with the V-mail?
It all had to be V-mail and regular mail. And whenever you could get near a phone, there would be a line. And we would get the call, like I said, in Sioux City, with losing a plane a week there.
Yeah, right.
I'd go to the PX and use the phone there and call home and say, well, Mom, I'm okay.
Well, let's talk about then when you finally went down. Did the Air Force notify her, or were you able to tell her? How did they find out about?
I think they got a telegram.
Oh, geez.
First of all, that I was missing in action, because I was.
Yeah. Did she ever, after the war, ever talk about what she was going through, what she was thinking, with you being in harm's way, and then finally getting that telegram? Did she ever talk about her thoughts or experiences or worries at all about that after the war?
I know she prayed a lot, and I think she got her comfort from her Lord. She never. Well, we had the star in the window, and then I was. I don't know if they got a telegram that I was killed in action, and then I was missing in action. And then I got back to the hospital, and then I could write to her.
Yeah, but still, that was still
write real good.
That was still weeks away before she would receive that, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, geez, I can't imagine.
So that had to be very hard.
Yeah.
And I lost my little sister, and she was run over by a truck when she was 5 and a half, and I was the first one there. You could see the lungs coming out of her mouth and everything. But my little sister was responsible. We figured it out, over 300 people coming to church and being baptized and being members of the church. And we're going to Sunday school, and she said, not yet, Papa, somebody's coming. And we were in the old Model T, and there'd be a neighbor kid come running. She'd be taking them to Sunday school with her. And then pretty soon their parents would come to church, and the kids would, and yeah, she's done more for the church than I have in 84 years.
Wow.
church.
Well, it sounds like your faith played a very important part, uh, not only looking over you, but helping you cope through through all your experiences during the
That's
time.
true.
Yeah. Have you? You said you caught up with that one that other waste gunner. Did you guys ever have any sort of reunions? Did you go to any reunions, any get-togethers through the
Well,
years?
I was married in Chicago in 1947, and the pilot was the best man. The co-pilot came down from Green Bay, Wisconsin. He was there. The navigator from Swampscott, Massachusetts, he was there. And I was there. So four of us were at my wedding in 1947.
And any other reunions throughout the years at all? What about that funny guy from Brooklyn? Whatever happened to him?
You know, I got cards from him, and I think he moved from, I remember where he lived. He lived near Prospect Park and Hoykomer Street in Brooklyn. And he was telling about his high school in Brooklyn. They had pop machines then, they had an elevator. And I thought, what the heck kind of high school did I go to? You know, and here he's got all this. But anyway, the last time I had gotten a Christmas card from him was from Virginia, state of Virginia somewhere. And that's the last one I got. So I think he must have gotten in an accident or something. The navigator went to pilot training. He wanted to be a pilot. Became a fighter pilot, jet pilot, and I don't know if that was Korea or Vietnam, but then he married some gal with 5 kids and committed suicide.
Huh.
And the pilot, he was worked for General Motors in wood pattern making in Lansing, Michigan. And I don't think he was happy doing that at all. And I don't know what happened to him, but he's gone too.
Yeah.
And the co-pilot, he re-enlisted, and he has a street named after him in Berlin, Don Lehmannstrasse. And his C-47 with a load of coal went into a building.
Oh, during the Berlin airlift?
Killed. And they got the bombardiers out in Oregon. And the ball turret gunner got killed. The tail gunner died in Bethel, Washington.
How was the transition for you going from military life back to civilian life when you got back? Was it much of a transition, particularly after all you'd been through? Was it much of a transition to?
Oh yeah, and then the women in the plants where I worked, hell, they were sorry the war was over. They were making such big money.
Yeah.
And I got out, got home in December. I got a job at Pullman Company, and I worked there about a week or so. And then the steel strike shut them down. I went to another place and worked for a couple of weeks, and the materials shut them down. I had 3 jobs in 3 months. And then my cousin Howie, the one that I saw in the Navy, he called me from Chicago. He said, "Hey, cuz," he said, "I'm working at Johnson & Johnson near the airport." And he said, "They're hiring." He said, "You could stay with us." And so I went out there and I got hired right away with Johnson & Johnson, and met my wife at a church outing there, and we got married in 47. And in 50 I went to college.
Did you use the GI Bill? Take advantage of the GI?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my dad was a barber, and he died the first 2 weeks I went to college. He got a paralytic stroke at 48, and he died at 51. And I went to barber college on the GI Bill also. And at Johnson & Johnson, the General Johnson was very strict. He was an Army general. He had his own C-47, and he'd fly from Metuchen, New Jersey, out to Chicago or other plants. and they'd find out that he's coming. And then I'd get a phone call back, and I was in the shipping department. They'd say, "Hey, Mark, can you get me the general's on his way?" So I had a chair that swiveled, and I had hot water for the soap around the ears, and give them a little trim, and the razor. Oh boy, you know, that was I earned all my spending money cutting hair there on my break period, and yeah, that was. But I didn't want to be a barber in a barber shop. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still got my barber tools.
Is that right? I'll be darned. Well, we could, I guess, start to. Well, I guess one question I wanted to ask you too. You were talking about your buddy from Brooklyn, and he was talking about elevators and pop machines and stuff. I imagine, as most people during that time, you probably hadn't traveled too far away from Michigan City before you went into the service.
The farthest I had been was Coldwater, Michigan, was about 150 miles away.
So here's someone, you get into the service, you're all over the country, meeting all sorts of different people. Then you're over in Europe. What was that like from here's a green-eyed boy from Michigan, or Indiana. What was that experience like to see all these new things and meet a guy from Brooklyn, probably with a thick accent, and
then you get on a ship with 14,000 some other guys, and go to a USO, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You heard about California. You shoveled snow and ice, and you played hockey, and you cross-country ski, went up in Indiana on the dunes and skied down those sandy slopes with them. And here I'm walking along and orange trees in Southern California, and they said, "Now, any of the oranges that fall over the fence, you can help yourself to, but don't pick them off the trees. They belong to the rancher."
Uh-huh.
So here in a nice green, dewy grass, you get a nice orange that's fallen, you peel that thing, and off the tree, they're just so delicious. In January, you're in Orange Grove in California. Unbelievable. So.
And what was it like, for example, over in Europe? Did you get leave to go into London and surrounding towns at all, and mingle with the locals?
Oh, the first time I went to London, they had a blackout and V2 bombing.
Oh, gee.
And it's so pitch black, you couldn't see anything. So I'm crawling along the curb, and I reach a pant leg, and here it is, a bobby. I got a hold of a bobby's leg, and then I think they gave the all clear, and then they'd turn on some lights, but it was really black and scary, and you could hear those buzz bombs coming.
And the scary part was always when it went quiet, right? That's
yeah.
When they were going to drop.
Yeah, and it just, you knew it was going to happen pretty soon. And they even had one out on in our bomber base. They hit that where some bombs were, so some bombs went off too. So then they had the beer was lukewarm, so they didn't have cold beer. And here we were, 18, 19, and we figured that they didn't know how to cook, they didn't know how to drink, they didn't know how to do anything. So, anyway, we don't know how they got along. But anyway, the people were nice to us in the taverns and in London, yeah. I went to that great big store, the one where the guy
Harrods.
Uh-huh. I bought a tie in there. Had that for a long time, but it was just a humongous big store. And London was just awesome, pretty town. I was in St. Paul's Cathedral, Easter, 1945, and I think it was about the next week I was shot down.
Wow. Norm, what we'll do, we'll start to wind down this interview. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about, or any stories that you can think of that you forgot and now are remembering and would like to add to the tape? Anything at all that, just to make sure we've got everything covered as best we could?
I think we probably got everything covered.
Okay.
I can't come up with anything.
Okay. Well, one question I always like to ask is, I think it's probably very evident, but how did that experience affect your life, change your life, play into your life, or did it? Or was it just a period of time? How do you think it played in the role of your life?
Well, I think I was very fortunate and blessed, and had a big family. My mom was one of 8 children. My dad was one of 6 children. I was the first man to graduate from high school. I was the first one to ever fly in an airplane. I was the first one to ever graduate from a university. And I don't know if I had not been in the service, if I would have had my eyes open enough to strive to do that. And the GI Bill was a wonderful thing that helped our country really grow. A lot of people, like myself, got educated, got to do things that would have been unbelievable for our parents. And so I'm thankful of our country to help me.
Yeah, but you paid the price for that though,
Yeah.
as well. It wasn't given to you.
No.
You earned it. Don't you feel?
That's true. So now my oldest son, he got to graduate, and his son now wants to be a surgeon and a doctor, because my oldest son has diabetes and had real problems with his eyes, and he's blind in his right eye. He's had a lot of laser pops, and now his son wants to be a surgeon to be able to help these people with that problem, and he's getting all A's. He's going to make it.
Excellent. Well, we'll close out. In closing down this interview, is there any closing statement or thoughts you would like to say to those that'll watch this someday, if you have anything?
Well, I would say this, that you ought to get on your knees and thank God you're in this country. Do something for your country. Stand up for it. It's not all bad. It's not all good, but it's mostly good. And when you get a chance to speak for your country, do it.
Very good.
It's still the best place in the world to live and grow up and raise a family. That's about it.
Okay. Well, Norm, I want to thank you for participating today and telling your story. More importantly, though, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. There is one additional thing that I want to say. I got a phone call about 2 years ago in October, and this fellow said, were you shot down over Pilsen, Czechoslovakia raid in 1945? And I said, yes, I was. And he said, well, what was the name of your airplane? I said, well, when we got to fly it, it was called the Old Black Magic. And he said, well, that's what I wanted to hear you say. He said, my name is Vern Schmidt. He said, I was in the 90th Infantry Division in World War II, and he said, I got a piece of your airplane. And he said, I'm with a church group from Fresno, California, and he said, we're going to be in Colorado, we're going to be in Colorado Springs in a few days, and he said, we got a big bus for our church, and we'd like to have you come down to Colorado Springs and celebrate with us. And so I said, well, I'd be glad to do that. So I went down there and I met him at the Cracker Barrel. The bus came, and they had about 50 people from their church there in Fresno. And he pulled out his wallet and he had a piece of our B-17. And he said, I was in a barn on the Czechoslovak-German border on April 25th. And he said, I was in there with 12 or 14 GIs. And he said, we heard this humongous explosion. He said, and we ran out of the barn and we could see this B-17 falling down. It was on fire, and there was some parachutes. The Germans were trying to shoot the guys in the parachutes. And he said, and I got a piece of your airplane. And so anyway, I was with him for 2 or 3 days. We went up the top of Pikes Peak, and I was with them. I went down there together, and they had a PA system on their bus, and I told them what had happened to me and how I got to come through this and be alive, and so I still hear from Vern, and anyway, he's still out there in Fresno, and he wants me to come to their reunion next year, and I don't know where it's going to be yet.
For his division?
For his division.
Okay.
And he was in Patton's Army, and anyway, it's a small world. That here's yeah, this is our crew, and this is me a long time ago. This is the pilot. He stood up at our wedding, co-pilot, navigator. This guy replaced the bombardier, and don't even know his name. The waist gunner, Harry Overbaugh, little Vinnie Ferrero, engineer from Brooklyn, and this is Bruce Walker, who got killed. And the tail gunner, Chuck Rollins. The Longest Night. And Mike Peters of the Greeley Tribune wrote the article up on me here. And this is a picture that Mike done. And this is the tail of our plane. Harry Overbaugh, Vinnie Ferrero, and me, the Norman Markel, the radio gunner. And those are.
It looks like you got it to the bottom left-hand corner, a reward from the award from the Senate. Can you tell
Senate,
about that?
Colorado Senate had an award, Purple Heart and Victory Medal awarded, and that's much appreciated. That's about it. This is a short snorter there from Brussels, Belgium, when we had to land in Belgium, and a picture of our crew in training in Sioux City. That was a full crew. This is my first civilian outfit of clothing after I got home from the war. And this shows the Air Medal and the Victory Medal and Purple Heart. And this one shows most of the tail where all of us were standing. It's all blown off. So
you remember what
whoever
mission?
was the tail gunner is long gone.
You remember what the mission was? What mission that was?
No, I don't
Okay.
remember.
Okay. And then your dog tags and
And my
your wings?
gunner's radio gunner wings.